Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to this wonderful event concert. I'm Joseph Lam, the director of the Confucius Institute, and I have the honor to open the talk part of the concert. First, let me explain why this concert is so wonderful and unique. As you know, the Confucius Institute is launched to promote Chinese arts and culture in America and to promote friendship and cultural exchange between China and America. And I think this is the best way to do it because through music, and in particular creative kind of music, then we can tell the American people and the Chinese people too that culture is a very live thing, it's creative. So rather than promoting Chinese culture in a stereotype fixed level, we are doing it Chinese culture in a global context as it is alive and as it's being created. And what goes particularly important for China and America is that the two countries and cultures are actually very, very involved. So there's some Chinese culture in America, like fortune cookies, or there's a lot of culture, American culture in China, like McDonald's, hamburgers. And jazz is really a local American expression that has become globalized and actually is picking up quite a lot in China too. And tonight we feature a particular artist who is really known in our field between China and America, Jon Jang, or Professor Jon Jang, who really is a legendary figure in this field called Asian American jazz or Asian American culture. And anyone who straddles Asia and China, America would really know how important his music and his message is. So we are very happy tonight to have Jon Jang to lead this concert. And of course, we have to say thank you to Professor Andrew Bishop and other UM faculties and students to help with this concert. They make a wonderful band to do this. And we also have Mr. Jin Wu, a local artist, who will be doing the Chinese and English narration. And because one of the pieces here is a celebration of Dr. Sun Yat-sen, who again is a connection between China and America. So the format we'll do today is we'll shortly introduce them, Professor Jon Jang and Professor S. Sarath and Professor Andrew Bishop to come and say a few words representing how they look at jazz and American Chinese culture in their own way, artistic and creative way. But before I invite them all come up, first I have to invite Jon Jang to come up because he is he's coming and spending a week on campus as the King-Chávez and Rosa. Let me say the full word. I cannot say. So he is the Martin Luther King Jr., Cesar Chavez, and Rosa Parks visiting professorship, which is offered by University of Michigan and the state of Michigan. So John, usually this is given to John by the provost, but he's out of town today, so I represent John. So thank you for doing the professorship for us.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming out and welcome. We're really looking forward to playing some music for you. Just to talk a little bit about my involvement and some of the process involved in this, I thought might be interesting, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague, and we'll let the composer speak. Have the last word, both figuratively and musically. So this summer, I got an email from John, and he said this really long introduction about, oh yes, I'm going to be on the University of Michigan campus. I'm hoping maybe we can collaborate and do this concert, and a long description about who he was and what kind of music that he did, and I immediately shot back an email. I'm pretty sure it was within the first few hours of receiving his email, and I said, I know your music quite well. One of your records, Two Flowers on a Stem, is one of my favorite recordings of the 90s, and I remember hearing it on the radio. A friend of mine had a radio show when I was a college student here at the University of Michigan, And this is about 1995. Is that about right? When Two Flowers on a Stem, it was right around that era, right?
That was what?
Two Flowers on a
Yes.
Stem, yeah, about 1995 was when it was live. Yeah. And I heard this traditional Chinese melody with a rhythm section behind it, and it was just so expressive, and it just really floored me. And so immediately shot back an email. I said I'd love to do concert, and I think we could get some students and some faculty involved, and we'll take a look at your music. And so it's all kind of come together really quickly. And I think one of the amazing things for me, although I certainly have listened to folk musics from all around the world, I'm certainly not a scholar of Chinese folk music, but it's amazing how quickly it becomes kind of a part of you, and you start to in the performance tonight. I have a lot of unison things with the peepaw, and you start to kind of pick up little musical nuances. And as a jazz musician, it's something that you do kind of every performance, and even if this is a little out of the ordinary in terms of the material as it is, and yet at the same time it's completely in the ordinary. It's expressive music and a really wonderful quality. So I think you're in for a really nice treat. I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Professor Ed Sarath, who has just always been always has such really great ideas about kind of global elements and combinations in jazz, and so it's really happy when he said he would be involved in this little pre-concert presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to him now. So.
And that was Professor Andrew Bishop, who teaches jazz composition, who's from Kansas. Now Professor Edward Sarath.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. And, it just dawned on me that just a couple of years ago in this very building, we had the 6th annual conference of the International Society for Improvised Music, which basically started in Ann Arbor at the university in our Jazz and Contemporary Improvisation department. And in this very building, we had Wei Han from China, and we also had, and so Joseph Lam actually helped coordinate that visit with Jin-Hee Kim from the Korean Institute also. And we had the first of a number of cross-cultural improvisations with Western musicians and Asian musicians from China and Korea at that time. And then actually Jin-Hee Kim is actually setting something up in Korea for one of our future meetings. So this event tonight is really in line with this very important theme that is so dominant in today's musical world. And it's interesting that the Rackham Building has a kind of karma for this Asian American kind of collaboration. I think it's really exciting. I happen to be teaching a graduate seminar this term called The School of Music of the Future. And one of the things that we talk about quite a bit is the melding of streams as kind of the central pulse of the musical world now for all of the cultures. And there's kind of a reversal where the sort of that central ocean where everything comes together is really the core, and the tributaries are the traditions that flow into it. And I think the task is, generally what music schools do is they focus on the tributaries, and one in particular, and the melding, the central ocean in which they originate and flow back into kind of gets left by the wayside. And so one of the themes that's coming up is that we need to shift our thinking so that we have the ocean and the tributaries in a very dynamic interplay. I think that's the wave of the future. And as a general principle, and in particular, I think jazz is a very powerful vehicle, basically because of its process breadth. It's the only genre, I think we can safely say this, the only genre in the world in which improvisation and composition exist in kind of in tandem to a degree that's unmatched by any other tradition. So it's really not surprising that jazz is kind of like a seed that's fertilizing many different, in blossoming in many different areas and inviting infusion from many different traditions. So, Jon, we're so happy to have you here. I was thrilled when Andrew told me about the visit, and perhaps you have a few words also about what this means to you, and maybe a little bit of a preview of some of what went into the music making too.
Well, I love that metaphor that you use about the ocean and the tributaries, because James Newton and I co-composed a work entitled When Sorrow Turns to Joy, Songlines, the spiritual tributary of Paul Robeson and Mei Lan Fong. How many of you have ever heard of Paul Robeson? All right. How many have heard of Mei Lan Fong? Okay, so well, I think it's about equal. Anyway, those two met in London in 1935, and they exchanged their views on singing. And Paul Robeson, actually the first Chinese music I ever heard was Paul Robeson singing Chinese folk songs in Mandarin, collaborating with Liu Liang Mo, who was from Shanghai, and they did the recording in New York in 1941. It was this, does anybody know what a 78 recording is? Okay, yeah, it was 78, so, and that changed my life because Paul Robeson saw that and embraced the universal connections of all folk music. So I want to lead to say that I have been very inspired by the experience I've had this week interacting with faculty and students and the whole University of Michigan community with from let's see, Introduction to Music, Musicology by Professor Christiane Castro. Let's see, Music of Asian Americans by Professor Amy Stillman, and she's also in the musicology department. Jazz composition with Professor Andrew Bishop, and also, let's see, and then finally, American Cultures, that is a focus on Asian Pacific American studies with lecturer Emily Lawson. And it's been a very exciting period because of the election. And I think what Professor Sarath is talking about, and what these other people are talking about, what is part of it is the shifting demographics, but also or the shifting waters that are happening. But I think that those of us who improvise, who are in that improvised world, we represent the knowledge industries, the creative thinkers. We think out of the box, and I think we are those who supported a certain president, and then there are, I think, people that have been living in a world that's sort of compartmentalized. So what we want to do is open that world for the people who have been compartmentalized so that they can become perhaps future leaders that can contribute to our country. And also this cultural exchange between the United States and China. Not sure if I have. Well, let me hand it over to Professor Sarath, because I think you're also serving as a moderator too, as well as a panelist.
Right. So this is it's an interesting, and I'm very fond of this. Without going into who anybody voted for, fond of the connection between the music making and the broader trends in society. I think it's a real important thing, and it's a real fertile, very powerful theme actually that's emerging, and you hear it. I'm not surprised to hear these words come from your mouth, in connection with your music, because it's the improviser is kind of a future, kind of a prophet in a way, a visionary, and has something that goes deep into sort of the essence of the human being, and that is something that's really needed. And I very much like the idea of little bit charged analogy with the political scene, but the fragmented side versus the more integrated. I think that's really kind of hitting at what this music and what this kind of collaboration needs to happen. Andrew, I just wonder if you have anything that you want to kind of, we were just kind of marveling that Andrew showed up here 20 years ago as a graduate student, and we've been basically, and this is a compliment, compliment to both of us, I said we've been having the same conversation for 20 years, and hopefully it's expanded and become a little bit more sophisticated on both ends, and I think it has. But do you want to kind of jump in here?
Well, not really much to say. One thing, John and I were talking though. It was really his, kind of changing the subject a little bit, but it was really his recording. I did a Hank Williams project about 8 years ago, and it was kind of the idea of these kind of melding. And certainly, it was funny because when I lived in Kansas, this is why I mentioned that, I hated country music, and even though my parents all listened to it, and my sisters and brothers-in-laws all listened to it, and moving away, sometimes you find little connections that you didn't necessarily normally find, and was able to, in a large part, reach an audience that I never thought I would reach through that project, and so yeah, it was in part, a lot of these kind of cross fertilizations that really kind of centered some of that thought. So. And I think you'll hear a lot of that certainly tonight as well, just with the traditional Chinese melodies and some of the rhythmic elements that kind of underpin it. So, John, you want to, and maybe we could finish up and play some music. So.
Okay. Oh, all right. Well, I was recently interviewed by Oberlin College. That's where I graduated during the 70s. And so I'm going to reference, I was quoted, I quoted Tupac Shakur. I wouldn't be here today if old school didn't pave the way. And so what that refers to is I really honor the past, not just the music history, but also the social history. And and also not only those who came before me. This was a quote to honor my late mentor, Professor Wendell Logan of African American music. He was a mentor who told me one time, John, and this is when I was a student, John, there's not one institution in the United States that deals exclusively with Native American music. And you can't take that literally. I think when he's talking about Native American music, it's not just Native Americans, it's also the Fisk Jubilee singers. It's also, when we talked about Chinese music, I'm not the first person that's done this. There was like Henry Cao, a great composer. In fact, tonight we're gonna perform Flower Drum Song, Feng Yang Hua Gu. And the flower drum song has many meanings, many layers, very long history, a tradition in transformation. And I discovered a book called Flower Drum Song, Chinese Folk Songs. It was published in 1943, and this sophisticated notation of Chinese folk songs. And it was done by these husband and wife named Chen. But the preface and the acknowledgments were written by Henry Cao and Pearl Buck. And they were very literate about Chinese. They were so advanced in their thinking. Now, how many people know who Henry Cao is? How about Pearl Buck? Okay, yeah, she was an amazing woman. I'm going to close with one more thing. What was I going to say is that I know a professor who teaches music theory at Columbia University. Her name is Elie Hassami. And she wrote a book about the composer Ruth Crawford Seeger. How many have heard of Ruth Crawford Seeger? Okay, great. Well, there's a work where she takes the poetry of H.T. Chang. How many of you heard of H.T. Chang? He was kind of like a communist, anarchist. Actually, he got kind of bounced around and eventually became a two-bit actor in Hollywood. But he also wrote a lot of poetry. He was kind of a hip Chinese-American, but anyway. And so he wrote a poem about the Chinese laundrymen, and Ruth Crawford Seeger wrote a vocal work in 1931. So there's been a long history of Chinese-American in modern American music. And, you know, I know we got to go. So there's no time to really talk about improvisation, but that's what we're going to do next in a performative way. Professor Sarath, do you have?
No, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure just sharing the stage, and we're looking forward to the music. Thank you very much, John.
Due to unforeseen circumstances, Michael Gould was unable to perform tonight on multiple percussion. Instead, we have Jonathan Ovell. We're going to begin as written on the program. And by the way, before I forget, we will not be performing New Beginnings, and we will not be performing Woman Shaman of Ali Shan. There will also be no intermission. So we want you to encourage you to try to stay through this entire performance. The first piece is called Golden Snake Dance. And the first time I heard this piece was like a Chinese New Year's parade. I'm from San Francisco, so we have this every year, Chinese New Year's celebration. And this is one of the popular pieces. It was written by Ni Er, who was a beloved composer of China. He wrote the Qi Lai, the Chinese national anthem, the March of the Volunteers, in collaboration with Tian Han. It was in a film called Children of the Storm. And we're going to first perform the traditional version by Min Xiaofan, and then we're going to immediately go into our modern version of Golden Snake Dance. Okay, so that was our demonstration. Did you hear the similarity? Okay, now we're going to perform it for real. Thank you very much. That was Golden Snake Dance. And now we're going to continue with Flower Drum Song, which I spoke about. And it's going to feature Min Xiaofan as a vocalist. Thank you. So I'm going to play a little bit more piano. Oh no, this is not the one. I'm sorry. This is